Alright, so we are going to be making some future drum and bass in FL Studio today. Getting started on a brand new project here. We are going to load up an instance of Serum. Now, for a moment, this is pretty much just going to be saw waves while I get the idea down, and then I'll show you a bit of my sound design process. So first things first, I'm going to lay out some chords. Let's go ahead and do that now. Alright, here we go. We're going to make that a bit wider than it currently is, and low pass it a little, and let's go ahead and listen. Perfect, okay. So now over top this, we are going to create a lead melody. We'll also start with a saw wave and then change it up later. So I got a comment on my last drum and bass tutorial, and someone mentioned they wanted to see my process of how I come up with lead melodies. So a good little tip that I do have, I like to start in this kind of view where I'm in the same pattern as my chords, so I could see them kind of grayed out here on the side. So I'll usually start with a note that's in them, and you don't have to adhere to this perfectly because certain notes that are not highlighted will still be in key. But if you just follow these, you should be able to come up with something pretty good. So let's try that, for example. Right? That makes sense. Perfect, I like that a lot. So we are gonna try adding a second bit. And of course, once you have a melody down, you can copy and paste it and then make some changes so that way it's still like following the same formula, but a bit unique. Because if I were to have this looping the whole time, it would get boring really quickly. So we're gonna extend it a little bit here. I think I'm actually gonna change up the chords a little bit. It might be more interesting if I do a movement more like this. We're gonna try to follow that as best we can, do something like that. Okay, this isn't right. That's what I was looking for. Okay, so now we're at the bit where we're gonna do some sound design. Now, this is kind of freeform. I have an idea of what I want to go for, but I'm not exactly sure. But what I'm gonna do anyway is kind of show the process. I'll cut it up a little bit to get rid of the boring parts, but for the most part, I'll try to just leave everything in there so you could follow along. But what we're gonna do is we are going to move these two elements, being our chords and our lead, to a third channel, and that's where we're going to vocode them, because I think that would sound really cool. Right now, pretty much the same. I'm actually going to go ahead and up this a little bit. See, now it's a little clashy, but if we put on a vocoder like so, then fix that. Okay, right now it's very, very nasty, I know. You just gotta tweak some things and eventually this will sound cool. So here's what I'm gonna do. I think I'm gonna mess with the mixer a bit because it's very overpowering right now. Change this. I don't have like specific settings in mind, I'm just kind of going through and seeing what sounds good. Okay, so we have something like that. What I'm gonna do now is add Serum effects. Now, the trick for this working, what I like to do is open up my patterns, which was over there, I didn't see it, my bad. We copy our lead melody, and we load an instance of MIDI out that we pasted on, and then set it to port 1. Then we have to link it in Serum effects like this, input port 1. And now this MIDI will be controlling the patch. So what we could do, for example, if we select distortion, just take the drive down, and then click on mix here so it goes to level, drag LFO1 to that. What this will do now, if you listen closely, let me just make a little shape like this so it's very obvious. So make sure you set this to envelope. You see how this is following the lead melody now? That's kind of the effect I want to go for here. And from there, we're going to turn on oscillator A, so it's playing it as well. Right, getting somewhere now. That's pretty cool. So now we've got like the basis of the sound going down, and this is the part where I just like to mess around with Serum effects for a while and just see if I can come up with anything cool. So let's see what we can come up with here. That's actually pretty sick. Okay. That already sounds pretty big, and we've done pretty much no external processing yet, which is really exciting. So I'm gonna add a couple more things before we do move on. Like so. That's very wide now. And from here, I think we're just going to mess around on the mixer, see what else we could add. So I think this sound especially would really like some disperser. Let's follow it with a huge compressor. And now I think I just want some movement on oscillator A because it's a bit boring right now. So we'll do like some basic movements to see what we can come up with. I don't think that's the vibe for this song, but that's pretty cool regardless. Maybe if we dial it back a lot. That's starting to sound pretty cool. So the sound is very messy right now. We are going to clean it up with an EQ. I like that bass that's in there right now. It might become a little too prominent once we do add an actual bass, but for now we'll leave it in. Take out unnecessary high end because this has a lot of it. Right, now I think this sound could benefit from some soothing because it's very resonant right now. Let's mess with it a bit. That's pretty good. Okay, don't worry, I know you've heard that melody a lot of times, but now we are going to add more to it in a bit. Okay, I think right now, what the sound wants before we do move on to something else is some multiband compressions. That way it's a lot more in line. I'm going to take this region especially. Give it some pressure. So what I'm looking for right now, it's just kind of a sound. Like multiband compression does have a sound if you push it really hard. And I think this being a frontal lead element would benefit from that sound. See if we turn it off. I think it loses a bit of power. So have that on. Maybe dry wet it a bit because it's a little extreme. I'm gonna quickly organize a few things and set up some sidechain and then the video will be back. Okay, I've just cleaned it up a little bit and added some sidechain. If you do want a more in-depth tutorial on how I sidechain, I did cover that in my previous drum and bass tutorial, which is kind of more of a DnB for beginners type of thing. I recommend you do check that out. There's a lot of good tips there. But here's what we got going on right now. Okay, so this needs some bass, and obviously this needs some drums right now. I think we're going to start with the drums. So I've got a snare here. I think this will work out pretty good. We'll throw that in. And for kick, I think we should go with something really zappy. I do have a kick in mind that I'm going to pull out here. Let's do it. Yes, that's an instant fit. I like that a lot. I think this could use a little bit of high end, not much, just something like that. Yes. So right now, we do need some hat energy, and as well, like I said, we need a bass. I think I'm going to really quickly come up with a bass line, and here's exactly how I do that. Same thing, we're going to stay in that pattern so we can see our previous MIDI data, and we are going to put this on a new mixer channel. And to start off, I'm just going to follow the chords. I don't recommend keeping that because it'll get boring, but you do that and then just add some different variation and you'll be in a good position. So right now we have a saw bass. I think right here an octave jump would be cool, like this. And then maybe a little jump like that before it goes to the last note. Cool. We could also do an octave jump here at the end, or we could save that for the second repetition so that way it has something new. I think that's actually going to be the call. So now we want to go into making a bass sound. Now, I don't really have an idea for this. We're going to try to just kind of come up with it from scratch. I just do something like this. So that sounds pretty awful, right? That's okay though. We are going to use that as some additional sound design. We're going to load up Saturn 2. And I think this might sound cool if I put kind of like a guitar amp preset on it. So we do have some of those here. Like this. I like that a lot. I think we need some automation going on in the high end, which we could do in that patch for Serum. Just something like this. Up here. Pretty cool. Kind of want this to be more of a low bass. We don't want too much going on in the highs. It depends on context though. This sounds cool on its own, but when I listen to it in context of the track, it might not make sense and it might want more of that, so we'll see. So we're gonna sidechain before we even listen to it, just because otherwise it will sound really bad. Okay, so right now we've just finished sidechaining our bass, and now we have this. Cool, let's take a look at an oscilloscope, just because like I mentioned in my previous tutorial, this is really helpful for making sure that your sidechain is really good, like on point. Let's take a look. This might want to be saturated a little more than it currently is. Ooh, that gave it a nice little crunch, I like that. Boost it up to compensate that. Alright, so I have a favorite hat right here. We're going to use this. And we're going to do a very obvious 3 hat. So the way I like to do this in FL, right now I'm on FL Studio 20, which doesn't have the crossfades that you could do right from the beginning of the audio clip. That is coming soon, thankfully. But the way I like to do this in the meantime, I like to select all of them, except the third one, so in a group of 4, and then just do this a bit, because this will give you this effect. So you'll notice, once I point this out, you'll kind of hear it everywhere in drum and bass. This is called the 3 hat. It's very prominent, and you'll notice it, especially when you're listening to your kick and snare like this. It just kind of gives you more rhythm, and it makes it easier to dance to. Very common technique, and I do recommend you do it. This isn't all we're going to do for hats, but we're going to make sure that that's there and very obvious. I'm going to also grab a downlifter, just to give it something as a bit of impact at the very beginning. I usually cut this right as the first snare hits. Right? That's pretty interesting. And then we do like a more splashy impact that comes in about here. Let's listen to everything in context so far. Okay, so I'm noticing a few issues with the mix. I think my snare is not sticking out enough, but I haven't done the snare sidechain yet, so that might be why. But we're going to duplicate this, and we're going to do some melody variation so it's not as boring. Okay, so that is the basics of how I would make a future drum and bass drop. That is of course not where this would end though. This still needs a lot of ear candy and it needs to be built with an intro and a build-up. I'm going to throw together something quickly and we'll take a listen to what we get. Alright, so we've done a couple of things to extend this track so far. We've added a very quick little build-up, nothing too special. What I've done to kind of flesh out the drop a little bit, I've added a super wet element that gives like a nice contrast to the pretty dry drop, and we got this. This is what's going on. It's just this hitting every time the chord changes. And then for our little build up here, I've made this quick little saw patch in Serum, which is automating to open up a low pass filter as it progresses to kind of get more hype. And as well, I do have a couple of risers in there. To demonstrate this right now, I'm thinking I might do a part 2 to this where I do polish this up a bit more, show you what I do next to kind of finalize things. But now I'll let it play out in full. Let me know what you think in the comments and subscribe for more tutorials in the future. I'll see you in the next one.